Did you know that as a woman, you're only fertile up to 6 days of your entire month? And that hormonal birth control doesn't actually balance your hormones, it shuts down your natural cycle. I'm Sam, founder of Rise and Thrive Wellness. And for over 8 years, I've been helping high achieving women just like you optimize their fitness results by working with their hormones, not against them. One of my clients, Jessica, came to me exhausted and frustrated after years of pushing through intense workouts, regardless of where she was at in her cycle. Just like a lot of you probably, she was training and living her life like a guy, treating every single day as the same. After teaching her the cycle syncing method, I'm about to share with you, she not only lost 20 pounds, but she reported the highest consistent energy levels she had felt in years and got a promotion. In this video, I'm going to reveal to you everything you were never taught, whether it be in health class or by your doctor, and this information is going to transform how you approach your health and fitness journey, your workouts, your nutrition, and even your work schedule. And by the end, you're going to understand exactly how your hormones impact your energy, your metabolism, and your performance throughout the month. So let me show you why most women are living completely out of sync with their bodies and how small adjustments can make a huge impact when it comes to results. So when we were young and most of us learned about our cycles, we were basically told you get a period once a month, here's a pad, good luck. And maybe you got slightly more information in health class learning about pregnancy and reproduction. However, I am yet to meet a woman who was actually taught from an appropriate age how to leverage her cycle for better health, fitness, and productivity. Instead, we are conditioned to power through, to train the same way, eat the same way, and perform the same way all month long, regardless of where we're at in our cycle. But here's the truth. Your female physiology does not work that way. Think about it. Have you ever wondered why some weeks you absolutely crush your workouts, but others you feel like a slug and you are dragging yourself through? These fluctuations aren't random or weakness. They're actually your body giving you signals of how to ebb and flow with your natural hormonal rhythm. And what I've discovered after working with hundreds of women is that these natural rhythms and these cues that our body gives us can actually be your secret weapon to optimize your health, your fitness, your energy, and your productivity. But when they are ignored, they lead to the exact issues my clients come to me struggling with: stubborn weight gain, energy crashes, cravings, and fitness plateaus that no amount of pushing harder seems to fix. And I like to think of our hormonal cycle like the four seasons of nature, right? The four phases that we go through the seasons. Each one has its own distinct needs and purpose. So starting with our first phase, which is menstruation, this is the phase that is most commonly associated with the season of winter. So lots of resting and hibernating. And in this phase, this is where you are actually bleeding. So typically this is marked, day one of your cycle is marked as the first day of full flow of blood, and any days of spotting leading up to that would be part of your luteal phase. And this phase is actually a crucial reset period. So what happens at this point of your cycle is that your estrogen and your progesterone are actually at its lowest. And this is where your body's resetting itself by shedding its uterine lining, or the endometrial lining of your uterus. And it's using a lot of energy to do that. So it is very common to feel lower energy during this phase and to feel like you need more time to rest and recharge. You're probably going to feel like you need a little bit more sleep. And hunger sometimes can be kind of a catch-22 for some people. You feel super hungry and you want to eat more. You have some cravings because your body is using that extra energy to shed the lining. However, for other people, because progesterone has just taken a big dip, and in your luteal phase, your progesterone is actually what stimulates your appetite. Most people notice they feel super hungry and want to eat everything the week before their period. That's because progesterone is rising and is at its highest, and that can stimulate appetite. So with that decreasing and coming down to a low, that can actually cause people to feel less appetized, as well as your inflammation is at its highest at this point, right? And you're going to feel crampy and you might feel a little bit inflamed and bloated. And that can actually also make food feel less appealing. It's also very normal to feel like you have less social energy during this time of the month, and leaning into alone time, recharge time, having a lot of downtime by yourself can be really great, or leaning into smaller, more intimate connections or gatherings. And when we're talking about training recommendations for the menstrual phase, this is where you really want to listen to your body, but you also do not need to stop exercising because you're on your period. I see a lot of women say that they're on their period, so they're not working out that week or they're not exercising. And contrary to popular belief, like you do need rest, but you don't need to cease all movement. It's not one of those things where you want to like stay in bed and like do nothing else, right? By actually doing gentle movement, you can help yourself feel better by getting circulation, and it actually eases cramping to get some gentle movement in. So by walking, going for a nice walk outside or walking on a treadmill, doing gentle stretching or yoga, maybe even a light Pilates class, all of these low impact forms of movement can be really helpful for you during this phase of your cycle. So it's not about stopping movement completely, it's about being strategic with it and actually pulling back to recharge to move into that next phase of your follicular phase and your ovulation phase where you can optimize movement. However, you still want to be doing something, right, to support your general health. Typically, you're going to pull back the most for the first 1, 2, maybe 3 days of your cycle. And once you hit like day 3, 4, 5, estrogen is starting to rise again. So you should feel better. Most people with a healthy cycle, obviously, this is different. Like if you have underlying health issues and you have hormonal imbalances, this may not be the case, right? But if you have a healthy functioning hormonal cycle, by day 3 or 4, your energy should be starting to pick up a little bit more. Your cramps should be more mild if you're still having them at all. And you should be able to ease back into going to the gym and strength training and stuff like that. So it's really like days 1 to 2.5, 3 that you want to be mindful with your energy expenditure and be more gentle with your body. And then moving into more of nutritional support for this phase of your cycle, this is where you really want to get a lot of iron-rich foods. Obviously, we're losing blood, right, in this phase of your cycle. So you want to replenish your iron stores. And you can do this through introducing lots of grass-fed beef, lentils, dark leafy greens are all great for that. We also want to be supporting healthy hormone function and reduction in inflammation, and we can do that by introducing lots of healthy fat. So that's going to be like your avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds, salmon, eggs, all that good stuff. And in the beginning of this, we talked about comparing this season to winter, right? And what do we want to do in the winter? We want to stay warm. So we want to support our body through nutrition with a lot of warming foods like soups, stews, bone broths, herbal teas. All of that can be really great for your menstruation phase. When you think of your body getting rid of your uterine lining and getting rid of the blood, you want it to flow. You want it to be able to do that without having much friction. And the best way I can explain it is thinking about coconut oil. When you look at coconut oil and coconut oil is kept in a place that is room temperature or colder, it starts to solidify, right? And it isn't this like liquidy, free flowing substance. It starts to get chunky and it starts to like the movement of it. If you were to try to pour it out, it slows down, right? That's exactly what your body is like when it is going through your period. So if you are cold, you're drinking a lot of cold beverages, a lot of cold foods, raw cold foods, it's going to be harder for your body to have that flow to, get rid of that endometrial lining. So lots of warming support in this phase of your cycle can be really helpful. So obviously we talked about the foods, right? From the warming foods, you can also incorporate in anti-inflammatory foods. This is going to be where you're going to have the most inflammation, like leading up to your period in the first couple days of your period. So you want to also introduce things like turmeric, ginger, berries as antioxidants to help reduce that inflammation. You can also add in anti-inflammatory teas, right? Like ginger tea or turmeric-based tea. Raspberry leaf tea is another like bless support tool to use for your period to help mitigate cramps and PMS symptoms. I like to use it more in the luteal phase, but we'll talk about that soon. So when we're talking about warming practices, though, we talked about the foods. You can also do this through supportive practices like using a heating pad, going in the sauna or like a steam room, a hot tub, cuddling up with a warm blanket. All of these type of things are going to be beneficial as well. I also think it's really important to talk about lifestyle and career focus as well in this conversation, because I think when we're talking about cycle syncing, a lot of people may have heard of some of this when it comes to like workouts, like cycle syncing or paying attention to your cycle ebbs and flows with your workouts, maybe even your nutrition. But when we're looking at how you perform in your everyday life and how you show up in your everyday life, I think that this is often overlooked on how we can optimize this so that you feel like you are in better flow of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I know some people are probably going to say like, hey, it's not really realistic for me to like pick and choose when I'm doing some of these things. And I totally get it. Obviously take this with a grain of salt and like implement what you can, take away what you can from this. But I'm just here to provide you with the information so that you can use what is going to be best for you in your life. So we're talking about like your life as a whole or your career, this is going to be the time of the month that is best for introspective work. I talked a little bit before about maybe your social energy being drained a little bit and this being the best time to like spend time by yourself or to do smaller intimate gatherings, right? From a social perspective. However, when we're talking about like career or lifestyle, this is also a really great time to do like journaling, goal setting, evaluating progress, or maybe like looking like at the last month, like what went really well, how did I feel about that, where can I optimize things, whether that's like in your career or in your life. And it's great to do like a time block to do some deep thinking and strategy based decision making, right? And it seems kind of crazy because you're like, half the time I feel like Garbo on my period, but that's why it is the best time to kind of retreat a little bit and look inward and really utilize that introspective energy that you have flowing with you. So, like I said before, with your social life, but in your work, like this is not the best time of the month to be booking 1,000 meetings or to be taking client calls if you're an entrepreneur or to be, doing a lot of social media content. Like if you are somebody who's on social media, right? Planning to like film and create all your content at this time of the month is not the best time of the month to do it, not to do sales or launching. Like obviously you can't take a step back from that stuff completely, but this is not where you want to be doing the bulk of that activity. You want to be doing more of the scheduling, reflective work, planning, evaluating, and all of that kind of stuff. And the last thing I want to mention in this phase is red flags and things to watch out for. So, these are things that would indicate that maybe your cycle is not optimized or you do have underlying root cause issues going on. So, this is going to be when you're on your period, if you have extreme fatigue, like you feel like you can barely even get out of bed, if you have really, really intense cramps, you have really heavy bleeding. Again, if you feel like you're changing your pad or your tampon like every hour, every 2 hours, or you feel like you can't even leave the house because you're scared to bleed through. If you're feeling super inflamed, very, very puffy, these are not normal, right? We're commonly conditioned to believe that because something is common, it's normal, and it's not. These are actually signs that your body needs extra support. So, like minimal cramping, having a little bit lower energy, feeling a little bit off, a little bit inflamed, all these things we've already talked about, is common because we have fluctuations, right? But if it is to the excessive point where you feel like it is completely derailing your life for that week of the month, that is not normal, and you can optimize that. Now we're going to move on to phase 2 of your cycle, which is your follicular phase. And this is most often associated with the season of spring. Technically, your menstruation phase is a part of your follicular phase, but like we call it something different because you get your period. So, moving into your follicular phase, this is from the day that your period finishes until ovulation. So, for most people, this is anything from day like 4 or 5 up to like day 7, all the way up to the day that you ovulate. People say ovulation is day 14 because that is smack dab in the middle of a 28-day cycle. So if you have an average cycle length of 28 days, people assume that you ovulate in the middle of that. That is not true for everyone, and you cannot pinpoint that without actually tracking your cycle through your basal body temperature, using a thermometer and or cervical fluid, right? So like for the sake of this conversation, we're going to say day 13, 14 is when most people ovulate. However, please take that with a grain of salt because you do need to confirm that for your body specifically. So, as you move out of your period and into your follicular phase, your energy levels begin to rise, right? And this is kind of like, when spring is coming out of winter, it's like, all of the coldness and dark and just goes away and you start to feel rejuvenated because the sun is coming out and flowers are blooming. And that's kind of how your body feels coming out of menstruation. So what's happening hormonally here is like your estrogen is starting to climb, which starts to boost your mood, your motivation, your cognitive function. So like we start to feel a lot better this time of the month, which is great. Because your energy levels are naturally rising, your sleep need decreases a little bit. So, maybe in your menstruation phase, you needed extra sleep, like you found like you were sleeping 8 to 9 hours, whereas in this phase, you might need that like 7 to 8 hours. You'll also naturally feel a little bit more focused and more clear-headed. When it comes to hunger in this phase, things start to become a little bit more regulated. So this is when it becomes a little bit more easy to focus and stay on track if you are following a specific, nutritional guideline or plan, tracking your food, this is where like you have less of those feelings of feeling like it's easier to go off track. And this is when your social energy starts to pick back up again. So starting to introduce more social events or hanging out with friends, your confidence is a little bit more boosted, right? So this is great for networking, trying new things, getting out and doing things, tackling lots of errands and to-do lists, because that energy to attack all those things is on the rise. Now, in terms of movement in your workouts, because like we've talked about, your energy is starting to pick up again, this is where it's great to start to push yourself again in your weight training, right? So from your period leading out of your period, right? The back couple days of your period and leading into your follicular phase. Like I said before, you can start like going to the gym, doing your weight training again, kind of business as normal. And as you move through your follicular phase, this is where you can really start to strategically use progressive overload, push harder, use heavier weights, more compound movements, and your body will have better recovery during this phase, which makes it ideal to challenge yourself and to take advantage of that. This is also a great time if you do want to introduce more training volume to utilize that in this week leading into your ovulation. And for nutritional support in this month, we want to incorporate a lot of foods that support estrogen metabolism. So this is going to be like cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, lots of vitamin C rich foods like citrus fruits, berries, bell peppers. These will all help stimulate collagen production. Fermented foods to support gut health like sauerkraut, kimchi, fermented yogurt, kombucha, stuff like that. Lots of lean protein to support our metabolism and muscle growth or muscle maintenance. This is going to be like your chicken, your turkey, your eggs, your fish, and lots of fresh, vibrant foods that kind of mirror that spring energy. So the purpose of this nutritional phase is to focus on replenishing the body, getting lots of micronutrients, and to support liver function and detox. Now, coming into like a career focus, right? When we're talking about your social battery, we said that is on the up and up, which is great. So this is a great time of the month to pack in lots of meetings, to do some networking, starting new projects, things that require fresh thinking, because like we said, your cognitive ability is being boosted in this phase of the month and you have like a clearer perspective on things. So scheduling innovative work, great time for learning new skills, new concepts, and doing lots of group work if you have any of that. And just a little bonus tip, if you are somebody who is incorporating cardio, this is the time of the month where you can start to add that back in, right? We don't really want to be doing a ton of cardio when our inflammation is higher and our energy is lower, but moving into your follicular phase. So if you are in a fat loss phase, or maybe you're training for a race or something like that, adding that cardio, or even like if you like to do HIIT classes or stuff like that, mix that in with your low impact strength training. This would be the time of the month where you want to start to filter that back in. And the red flags and things that we want to look out for in this phase specifically is going to be if you have a really heightened anxiety or you have chronic headaches. Another one is blood sugar imbalances. So that may manifest in a way of headaches and or energy crashes in the afternoon, right? So maybe feeling like you need like a nap around 2 or 3 p.m. every day, or having cravings later on in the day, or impulses to binge eat, and trouble sleeping is another big one. Moving on to phase number 3, this is the ovulatory phase. So obviously this is where we ovulate, and this is typically around day 14. Like I explained earlier, this can be earlier or later for people depending on your cycle length and your hormonal flow. Mine tends to be a little bit later. I tend to ovulate around like day 17, 18 personally. However, like I said, you can't really confirm that without tracking your cycle. So if you guys do want me to do a video on cycle tracking and how to do that in depth, I can do that. Just drop that in the comments. But this is the season where we're going to compare it to summer, right? Where life is good and you are feeling your best. And although ovulation itself is really only like a 24 to 36 hour event in our cycle, the effects surrounding the ovulatory phase and like the benefits we get from that typically last like 3 to 4 days. So when we're talking about what's happening hormonally inside us, this is where your estrogen and your luteinizing hormone peak to release an egg. And this hormone surge causes like a cascade of effects in the body that we get to take advantage of. So if we're assessing how you're going to feel during this phase, your energy is theoretically at its highest. That's assuming that obviously you have a balanced hormonal cycle and you don't have any underlying issues going on there, and that all those other boxes are being checked. Obviously, if you like slept for 5 hours the night before of when you'd be theoretically moving into your ovulation phase, you're probably not going to be feeling your best, right? But assuming that everything is kind of going smoothly in the way that you would want it to be, this is where you should be thriving and and feeling your best at this time of month. So your sleep needs are less crucial. You still want to be getting that minimum 7 hours to just support your overall health, but you're not going to be feeling like you need as much sleep or that your body's asking you for more rest. Hunger is typically lower in this phase because estrogen is at its peak. So, like we talked about in the follicular phase, as estrogen rises, I said that your hunger cues were going to be a little bit more regulated and you were going to have less food noise or be less food focused. And that is true continuing into this phase. Also, some people report because they are, they have peak energy at this part of their cycle and they're so focused on getting things done and, going to social events and, crossing things off their to do list, that they are also less food focused. And like I just mentioned, your social energy is going to be at its peak. So this is the best time of the month for social events, interviews, photo shoots, depending on, what you have on your plate. If you are, planning like a big event, like a wedding, or you have a birthday party, like again, obviously life isn't perfect and we can't always plan things out with our cycle, but if you can, and that's doable for you, this is the best time to plan something like that as well. This is also where you're going to just feel your best and your most confident. Like I don't know if you ever noticed in the month where there's certain weeks where you like put on an outfit and you're like, damn, I look good. Like I feel like I'm like nice and slim and toned and like my inflammation is down and I'm glowing and I just feel like a 10. This is typically that time of month. So you want to embrace that by being able to be your most vibrant self this time of the month. And then when we're talking about movement, workouts, training recommendations, right? This is going to be the prime time of the month if you want to try something new or you want to challenge yourself. So if you're kind of trying to do like performance testing to see if you can like hit a new PR or like how fast you can run a mile or you want to do some sprints, like this is the time to do it. If you're following a structured weightlifting program using progressive overload, this is where you want to really push that progressive overload into the failure rep range at this point of the month. However, that being said, just because it's our peak point of energy of the month doesn't mean that you want to overtrain and burn yourself out either, right? It's still very important to have balance, make sure that we are bringing in low impact movement, like you're still walking, stretching, doing mobility work, right? And making sure that we're supporting the nervous system as well. But this is typically where you are going to feel like your strongest, most badass self in the gym. For nutrition, we want to focus on really supporting the gut in this phase. You want to get lots of fiber rich foods. So that can look like broccoli, berries, avocados, whole grains, fruits and vegetables with the skin on are a great way to get more fiber. We also want to be having lots of raw fruits and vegetables because this is the best time of the month that our body can tolerate that, right? So lots of salads, or you could do like raw veggies with like a dip. And we want to be getting lots of zinc and omega-3s. So you can do that through seafood and staying well hydrated. So you can do that through obviously drinking lots of water, adding in electrolytes and water-rich foods. So that's going to be like watermelon, cucumbers, celery, that kind of stuff. And the reason why we want to do this is because you might be training a little bit more intensely at this time of the month. So it means you're probably going to be sweating more and getting rid of more liquid. And when we're looking at the impact on your career that this phase has, I know it's very short-lived, right? It's only a couple days, so it's kind of hard to plan too much in this phase. But this is, like we said, your energy is going to be the highest. So you want to take advantage of that. If you're going to have like any presentations, networking events, high visibility tasks, filming, like if you are somebody who creates content for your job, doing a lot of filming in this period can be really great because you're going to have the highest social output and you're going to be the most charismatic and personable and like in that kind of energy. Also, if you're like in a sales role, right, doing lots of negotiations, getting a little bit bolder, this time of the month can be in your favor as well. Also, this is typically where like leadership qualities tend to come out more in the woodwork as well. So if you're like a team leader or something, this can be a great time to have like a team meeting and set expectations or like give group feedback and stuff like that. Now, in this phase of the month, the red flags or things we want to look out for is going to be intense ovulation pain. So if you're getting like ovulation cramps or ovulation spotting, that can be normal, but if it's intense, we want to make sure that we're looking into that, as well as high anxiety and bloating can also be signs of inflammation that we want to explore as well. And the fourth phase that we're going to talk about, the final phase, is the luteal phase, the dreaded luteal phase. I feel like this has gained so much attention on social media. A lot of it is like for comedy purposes, but it's kind of just become this thing where we've almost become resigned as women to just like having a shitty 2 weeks of our cycle. And it's like half my life sucks. And while I know that that's like, somewhat playing on just making jokes, it's kind of upsetting that like that is the response from some people. And like some people do think that that's unfortunately something that they're just stuck with because it's not the reality, right? And if you are optimizing your cycle and working with your body, you really shouldn't have that many terrible symptoms. And really, that peak like downtime of not feeling your greatest should really only be a couple days. So we're going to dive into that into this phase. I think this is the most important phase to optimize if we're talking about, the 4 phases. We do want to optimize all 4, but I think this is the most important one because this is going to mitigate your period symptoms as much as possible, as well as give you more time in your month to feel, quote unquote, normal. The other phases, like most people tend to feel reasonably decent in, right? Obviously, your period, like I said, the first couple days are not the most fun, but I would say the back half of your luteal phase, like the last couple days leading up to your period and the first couple days of your period, are really where like symptoms should be compounded if you're experiencing any. So we're going to do the best that we can to get you feeling better if you are feeling a lot outside of that. And this is the phase where we would compare it to autumn or fall, obviously, because it's leading into winter being our period, right? So this is where fall naturally, it starts to get colder out. You start to slow down a little bit. You're preparing for winter. And that's exactly what your luteal phase should be. It should be like optimizing and preparing your body the best that you can for your period or your menstruation. So what's happening hormonally in this phase, actually, it's kind of crazy, is that your body is preparing to support a pregnancy, right? Like, a lot of you who are watching this, you might be trying to conceive or you might be trying to avoid. Regardless of where you're at, right? It's still important to understand what's going on with your body in this phase. And this is where your body has now released the egg in ovulation, right? And your body's progesterone levels are rising so that it can support the uterine lining so that that egg can implant and you can become pregnant. So this phase is longer than the others, right? It is about 14 days for the average person. Again, if we're using the reference of a 28-day cycle with ovulating on day 14, that is not the reality for everybody. But for the basis of this conversation, that is what we will use. And it has 2 distinct parts. So there is the early luteal phase, which is like post-ovulation, moving into your luteal phase. And then you have your late luteal phase, which is the back half. So in your early luteal phase, you're not going to really notice that much of an energy shift, right? Your energy is still relatively high. It's your late luteal phase is where you're really going to notice some of these symptoms coming in and your energy is starting to dip because your body is preparing for menstruation, right? Or if it is, if you did, in fact, fertilize and implant an egg, you are now pregnant and your body is putting a lot of energy into nurturing and supporting that pregnancy. But for most of you, if we're just going through this cycle repetitively, right, like we're going to talk about it in today's context of preparing for menstruation. So as you go through your luteal phase, as we start in the early luteal phase and we transition into the late luteal phase, you will notice that your sleep need will increase. So it won't be too different, coming out of ovulation and into your luteal phase, but by the mid luteal phase into the back half, you will feel more tired. Your body will naturally provide cues that it wants more rest. So this is where you may need like 8.5, 9, some people 10 hours of sleep. There was a recent study done that was shown on sleep needs for women specifically, because a lot of studies historically had been done on men or non-cyclical women, so women who are like past menopause. And it actually showed that most women need, especially in their luteal phase and their menstrual phases, up to 9 to 10 hours of sleep. So this is where, you're probably thinking this and you're like, Sam, I don't even got enough time in the day to do the bare necessities in life because I got so much going on. How am I supposed to sleep for 9 to 10 hours a day? That's ridiculous. And, I'm not insinuating that you should be sleeping for 9 to 10 hours a day. I'm just saying that your body is probably going to indicate that it needs more rest in this phase of your cycle. And that is normal to feel. So don't feel like you are a failure or you are, just lazy or unmotivated. It is normal to need more rest. And this is because your body is actually physically working harder, right? It's preparing for menstruation. And what is happening is that your body is actually burning an extra 100 to 300 calories per day because your metabolism is rising. So naturally, that's also going to translate into increased hunger. So this is another thing that I commonly see when working with clients is that they feel bad or guilty because they feel like they have more cravings or they are hungrier in the days leading up to their period, and they feel like they're doing something wrong, right? And they get down on themselves like, oh my God, why can't I stop eating? Like I'm constantly feeling hungry. I want a snack. I'm having cravings. cravings. And it's because your body is giving you signals that actually needs more fuel in that phase of your cycle. So if you do notice this happening, it is okay to eat a little bit more in that phase of your cycle. And by making sure that you are proactively like kind of front loading your food to make sure that you're getting lots of protein and healthy fats to regulate blood sugar and having balanced meals, lots of fiber rich foods right in the first half of the day, and making sure that you're eating a sufficient amount of calories in the first half of the day, that will help stabilize and lead to less cravings and binge eating and stuff like that in the back half of the day, right? And feeling like you were gonna, you just want to eat everything, you're gonna eat all the chocolate in the world. You may still have some cravings, but you can, like I said, use a strategy to regulate your blood sugar and make sure that your body's getting enough fuel in the first half of the day to help mitigate that. It's also very, very important to stay hydrated at this point of the month because dehydration can also mask as cravings. Now, when we're talking about social energy at this point of the month, the first half of your luteal phase, you'll probably still feel relatively good. But as you get into the late luteal phase, you will probably notice that all you want to do is curl up on the couch and binge watch Netflix and eat snacks. So again, when we're talking about normal or what to expect to, experience at this point of the month, to feel a little bit more like isolated, wanting to spend time like you're by yourself, similarly to the period phase or your menstrual phase, that is very common for a lot of people. Now with training, this one's interesting because we want to split it again into the two different phases of the cycle where like the early luteal phase, we're going to be doing one thing, and the back luteal phase or back half of the luteal phase, we're going to be doing something different. In the first half, you can still train as you would similarly to the follicular phase, right? So you can still do your normal strength training. You can maintain intensity. You should still feel relatively strong. You want to focus on maintaining your form and your technique, especially as you get to the tail end of that phase, because you may start to feel a little bit more tired, right? So really making sure that you're focusing on your form and your technique is important to avoid injury if you are keeping that intensity level up a little bit higher. But as you move into the back half of that luteal phase, we do want to pull back on volume and intensity a little bit. And we want to prioritize optimal recovery through sufficient sleep, proper nutrition, and giving your body more rest. So rest days, rest periods, whatever it might need as needed. This is also a great time to do a deload if you need to. So if you're at a point in your program where you feel like you could use a little bit of a deload week, this back half of your luteal phase into the first couple days of your period is like a perfect time to do that. Now, it's really important to build and use your intuitive connection with your body, especially in this phase, because if you do notice signals of poor recovery, so maybe you're feeling really sore, maybe your energy is really low, you feel like your motivation is really low. These are all signs that your body is moving into more of a stress response. And that's what's going to push up inflammation in this portion of your cycle. So you want to really listen to your body. And if you do feel like that's happening, swap out some of the higher intensity training for lower intensity training or active recovery. So like instead of, pushing your progressive overload that week or pushing for PRs, you want to really scale back and maybe like working to like a 70% intensity in your weight training. Or like I said, adding in active recovery sessions. So that can look like, going for a hike, doing a restorative yoga class, doing a Pilates class, right? Like a mat Pilates class, something more low impact. And this is going to be really important because we want to moderate inflammation as much as possible in this phase to also help support your menstrual phase, right? If your inflammation is really high going into your menstrual phase, your period and your PMS is going to be a lot worse. So we want to keep that inflammation low and that stress response low, which leads me into talking about nutrition next, because I believe that while, training is very important for moderating stress on the body and not, spiking cortisol levels and keeping things like, lower impact, it is a important part. But to me, nutrition is also something that's very, very important when we're talking about inflammation, because what you choose to put into your body, especially in this phase of your cycle, can either really help minimize inflammation or it can maximize inflammation. So we want to really focus on supporting the body through low inflammatory foods in this phase of the cycle. So some of the things that you want to really reduce consumption of, if not eliminate for this portion of your cycle, are going to be inflammatory triggers. So this is going to be caffeine, this is going to be alcohol, this is going to be refined sugars, this is going to be gluten, this could potentially be dairy for some people. And I know that this sounds restrictive, but it's literally for just a couple days. And by taking those things out or by really decreasing the consumption of them, it can be really supportive for how you feel throughout your PMS and into the first couple days of your cycle. And then when we're talking about what you do want to eat, we want to eat lots of root vegetables. So this is going to be like sweet potato, carrots, beets. We really want to get that grounding energy B from our root vegetables. We also want to be eating lots of magnesium-rich foods. So that's going to be like dark chocolate, which you're probably like, what? You're giving me permission to eat chocolate? But yes, dark chocolate in moderation. Almonds are another great one, dark leafy greens, and magnesium is really important, especially pre-period, to help alleviate PMS symptoms like cramps and bloating. We also want to get some complex carbs in there. Like I mentioned before, your body is going to be burning more, right? It needs more energy. So we want to get some complex carbs in there to help for a steady blood sugar release to get energy. So this could be like brown rice, this could be quinoa, this could be oats. And this is also going to help boost serotonin production, which is like our happy hormone. And lastly, we want to bring in lots of high protein foods to help keep us satiated and keep blood sugar regulated. So this is going to be like beef, chicken, eggs, fish, turkey, like whatever you want, right? But have a really high protein focus, especially to also help curb cravings at this point of the month as well, which is like a common PMS symptom. And if you're feeling really, really hungry, you can add, like I said, that baseline of 100 to 300 calories to your normal intake per day to help offset that so you aren't feeling super hungry and restricted. So for career focus and like how this can impact your job, when we're looking at it, in the two sections of this phase, the first half is going to be very similar to your follicular phase, where your energy is still going to be reasonably high and you can still focus on those higher energy output tasks, right? Like meetings and innovative work, creative work, projects, all of that, right? But as we move into the back half of your luteal phase and energy starts to taper down, this is where you're going to start to feel more similar to how you would in your menstrual phase, right? Where you want to be a little bit more introspective, a little bit more pulled back. You're probably going to be doing more behind the scenes work. So this is a great time for like detail orientated work, like editing, organizing, admin based stuff, and completing projects, right? Finishing up projects before we move into our menstrual phase, where you're going to want to be pulling back on the workload a little bit. And then, moving into to your follicular phase, either revisiting projects or like starting new projects again. Also taking into account that you might need more rest during the back half of your luteal phase, right? So maybe having a little bit of a lighter schedule load in this phase as well. And then a little bonus section for this phase that I wanted to add was stress management techniques. Because like I said, this is the time of the month where like your physiological stress and your inflammation is on the rise. So implementing nervous system regulation techniques, if this isn't something that you're doing month long, I highly recommend staying on top of it month long. But if you don't, right, if you're going to use it, the time to use it is definitely in the back half of this phase leading into your menstrual phase to help mitigate that inflammation and stress response in your body, right? So doing things like meditation, box breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, restorative yoga, stretching, all of these things can be really great practices to help with your stress management proactively. And things to watch out for, or red flags in this phase, are going to be extreme mood swings. If you feel like you have two personalities when it comes to the back half of your luteal phase, or you feel really irritable on edge and it's just like out of control, like you just can't even control when you're snapping, that is a really big red flag. Also, having extreme fatigue, like to the point where like you need to stay in bed all day, like the days leading up to your period, that's another really big red flag. Bloating and breast tenderness are both like somewhat normal or common during this phase of your cycle because of the progesterone rise. It does lead to more constipation and our bowel motility slows down. However, if you are not going to the bathroom for multiple days, or your breasts are so tender that like you literally like can't even touch them, those are also red flags and things that you want to look into for underlying hormonal imbalances and can be signs of progesterone deficiency or estrogen dominance. Lastly, the thing I will mention is if you have multiple days of spotting leading up to your period, or you have like really dark brown or like kind of reddish black looking blood, that is also a sign of low progesterone and something to look into. So something I just wanted to mention that's kind of like an important note is debilitating PMS symptoms is like a clear cry out for help from your body that there are hormone imbalances that need to be investigated. For a woman, your cycle health can actually be looked at as your sixth vital sign because it shows so much into what's going on under the hood of your body. So if you feel like you're losing half of your month to your cycle symptoms, that's a clear sign that your body needs support. And this is something that I help my clients overcome and optimize through training, nutrition, and lifestyle optimization. So the last thing I want to leave you guys with were some actionable implementation tips of things that you can start doing today to help you become more aware of what's going on in your body and how to use this in your everyday life. So the first thing that you can do is start tracking your cycle. You can either use a journal to keep track of symptoms, symptoms or use a digital app. Some great apps out there like Flow, Read Your Body. There's so many different cycle tracking apps. But one thing I will just, kind of put out there as a caveat is that a lot of these cycle tracking apps just use like the calendar method or rhythm method where it just naturally will take whatever your tracked cycle is and put your ovulation right in the middle. So if you are interested in actually learning when you are really ovulating, you would need to invest in something like using a basal body thermometer, right? A BBT thermometer. There's wearable ones, or you can actually orally take it each day, as well as tracking cervical fluid. So, looking at what your cervical fluid looks like, whether it is sticky or egg white like, or etc. Right? Like I said, I can do a whole video into this because I took a course and I learned all about this for myself. Or using LH testing strips, right? So you would need to confirm your ovulation if you're looking for more in-depth cycle tracking. But if you just want like more of a symptom tracking method, using like just a digital app like Flow is a great way to track how long your periods are, how long your cycles are, and when you're experiencing what symptoms. So I highly recommend that. Also, listening to and tracking your sleep and hunger cues. This is really, really great biofeedback for you to have the data to assess how you are changing throughout your cycle and kind of, what is impacting your cycle. And also making sure that you are honoring increased hunger and sleep needs leading up to your period. Understanding your social energy and your social battery is really important too, so you're not burning out and overdoing it. Start to really turn inward and notice when you naturally feel like you are inclined to want to give social output and to go out and be outgoing, and when you need recharge time to spend time by yourself, because both are completely normal. And lastly, optimize this as much as you can to your work life as well. While it is more natural to implement this within training and nutrition and, behind the scenes lifestyle, like we already talked about, bringing these concepts into how you show up at work can also be really helpful to manage your work performance, to perform your best, and to also manage and avoid burnout. As you can see in this video, your hormonal cycle is your body's monthly blueprint for optimizing your energy, your strength, and your well-being. And when you start to live in harmony with your hormones and work with them, not against them, you will start to feel more energized, more confident, and in complete control of your health and your results. So if today's episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with a friend. And if you are ready to take control of both your hormonal cycle and your results, click the link in the description and book a free strategy call with me today. Thanks for listening. See you guys in the next one.